Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're unpacking what has to be one of the most scrutinized, claustrophobic, and just utterly chaotic chapters in modern history, the final days of Adolf Hitler. Now, for decades, the granular, nitty-gritty details of exactly what went down as the Third Reich collapsed were literally buried under the rubble of Berlin. But thanks to some newly revealed documents tied to French Commandant Raymond Rose, we now have this incredible, unprecedented first-hand look at those terrifying final hours inside the Führerbunker.
So what was the atmosphere actually like underground, while an entire empire was falling apart right above them? You see, before he took his own life, Hitler ordered the destruction of almost everything connected to him. We're talking documents, photographs, personal records, the whole shebang. He literally tried to erase himself from history so his enemies wouldn't get any trophies. Okay, let's dive into this.
Part 1. The Chilling Discovery. Picture this. It's November 25, 1945. A French officer, Commandant Raymond Rose, arrives at the bunker complex. Now, to even get inside, he had to descend exactly 26 concrete steps. Just imagine taking that walk. 26 steps down from the absolutely apocalyptic surface of Berlin, straight into this pitch-black, dead-silent underground chamber where history had just violently concluded. And wow, what Commandant Rose found at the bottom of those stairs was just deeply unsettling. The rooms were filthy, completely abandoned. Papers were just scattered absolutely everywhere. Heavy furniture lay overturned, and there was melted candle wax covering the floors. It didn't look like the mighty headquarters of a world leader at all. It looked like the remnants of a collapsing nightmare. But here's the crazy part. Among all this mess, Rose found records showing that even in this absolute squalor, Hitler remained stubbornly, almost delusionally committed to finding some magical way to claim victory.
Part 2. Inside the Führerbunker.
This contrast really perfectly illustrates the madness of those final days. Outside, you've got literally apocalyptic rubble. Allied bombs are just raining down day and night, and 900 Soviet tanks are rapidly advancing, basically turning Berlin into skeletons of concrete and steel. But inside, it was a totally different world of claustrophobia and deep delusion. Nazi radio broadcasts were still pumping out these confident propaganda messages and patriotic music, all while the people actually living in the bunker were just paralyzed by a grim, cold reality.
And keep in mind, this bunker wasn't just some basement. It was a heavily reinforced fortress sitting 7 meters, that's right, 7 meters beneath the streets near Berlin's Brandenburg Gate. It was originally designed under the supervision of Albert Speer way back in 1936. Built to withstand the most devastating bombing attacks you could possibly imagine. We're talking massive concrete walls surrounding this dizzying maze of narrow hallways and cramped rooms, completely sealing everyone inside away from the world above.
But as you can imagine, being sealed completely underground came with a terrible sensory cost. Since there was zero fresh air, these massive mechanical ventilation machines had to pump oxygen in, running non-stop, literally day and night. For the people trapped in this maze, the relentless, droning noise of those air machines essentially became a form of psychological torture. It just amplified that terrifying feeling that the walls were slowly, inevitably closing in on them.
And, as the war collapsed, so did the dictator himself. He was showing clear symptoms of Parkinson's disease, constantly trying to hide his hand tremors by stuffing them into his pockets. Witnesses noted he was pale, exhausted, and looked easily 10 to 15 years older than he actually was. He was entirely reliant on his physician, Dr. Morel, pumping him full of glucose and vitamin injections just to get through the day. So the crucial point is, Hitler's rapid physical and mental deterioration perfectly, almost poetically, mirrored the total collapse of his empire. The man who once controlled millions literally couldn't even control the trembling of his own hands.
Part 3. Loyalty and Betrayal.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this quote from Eva Braun, Hitler's longtime companion. "This place is terrifying, but I'm happy because Hitler is here with me." Historians actually pieced this together from letters she wrote to friends that somehow survived the war. She had the chance to escape, she really did, but she completely refused. Her surviving letters reveal this lonely, almost romantic devotion, but at the same time, a really deep sense of isolation and sheer terror as she just sat there, waiting for the inevitable end.
Well, while Eva showed absolute, unwavering loyalty, the exact same could not be said for Hitler's inner military circle. Just tracing Hermann Göring's rise really shows you how deeply embedded he was. I mean, he wasn't just anyone. He was appointed to the Air Ministry in 1933, he was Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe by 1935, oversaw the massive 4-year plan, and in 1941, he was officially named Hitler's successor. He was about as deeply embedded and trusted as you could possibly get. But, as we see time and time again, a collapsing war changes absolutely everything.
Believing Hitler was permanently trapped in Berlin with basically no realistic way to command Germany, Göring sent this fateful telegram. He essentially asked if Hitler was still capable of making decisions, and if not, requested that leadership be officially transferred to him based on that 1941 succession plan we just talked about. Now, to Göring, sitting safely outside Berlin, this seemed like a perfectly logical request. But to Hitler, trapped underground, exhausted, and totally consumed by paranoia, it felt like the ultimate stab in the back.
Hitler's reaction was, well, explosive. He literally explodes with rage. He immediately strips Göring of every single position and title, declares his oldest ally a traitor, and orders his immediate arrest. The irony here is just absolutely staggering. I mean, as the Soviet Red Army is practically at his doorstep, literally pounding the city into dust above his head, Hitler is spending his final days fighting enemies inside his own inner circle.
Part 4. The final 24 hours.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because the pacing is just truly surreal. At 1 a.m. on April 29th, in this bizarre small underground ceremony, Hitler officially marries Eva Braun. Then, by early morning, he's dictating his final political and personal testament. Fast forward to 3 p.m. on April 30th, he actually tests a cyanide capsule on his beloved dog, Blondie, just to make sure it works. And by late afternoon, the couple retreats to their private room and commits a double suicide. The transition from a bizarre wedding to a meticulously planned death takes less than 40 hours. It's incredibly fast.
Part 5. The ashes and the proof. After the suicides, the destruction of the remains was incredibly methodical. Following their death by cyanide and pistol, the bodies were carried right up those concrete steps to the bunker garden, doused heavily in fuel, and burned completely beyond recognition. Hitler had explicitly ordered this beforehand, mostly because he was absolutely terrified of his body being seized and paraded around as some sort of Soviet trophy. He wanted literally nothing left behind.
So when the Soviets finally arrived, all they found were charred remains. But investigators had one absolutely crucial piece of evidence, and this brilliantly illustrates how the biggest mysteries can be solved by the smallest details. See, Hitler had infamously terrible teeth and possessed a highly distinctive gold dental bridge. Investigators recovered these unique dental remains and were able to match them perfectly with existing records and testimony from his actual dental staff. The ultimate, undeniable proof of the dictator's demise literally came down to a simple match of his teeth.
We've explored the claustrophobia, the extreme paranoia, the betrayal, and the meticulous destruction of evidence based on Commandant Rose's documents. It's really a fascinating look at the total collapse of a regime from the inside out. But I want to leave you with this final thought. If you had been an investigator walking down those 26 dark steps in 1945, surrounded by chaos and melted wax, would you have believed a dental bridge was enough to undeniably prove his death? Think about that for a second. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history around you.